What is the world's scariest drug? I know this is going to sound dumb, but my scariest experience on any drug was off a dab. Keep in mind, I was a heavy ganja smoker for 7 years. Recently I have been feeling like a loss of reality. Anyways, I was drunk one night and wanted my fix of weed. So I called up a homie and agreed to smoke him up if he took me to a plug. When we got to the plug, a good friend of mine, he offered us a dab. We both hit it, but I was the only one tripping. We were sitting on his porch talking as I took this dab, blah blah, we finished small talk, I got my weed and it was time to go. Immediately I feel I cannot walk at all, I slur my words like never before. Almost as if my tongue just stopped working. My friend was going to drop me off as I obviously looked distressed. On the way home I can just remember looking at the passenger side mirror and thinking to myself, this is like an acid trip. Never has an acid trip been this bad though. I couldn't recognize myself, I was actually forgetting who I was as a human being, couldn't even pronounce my name correctly or even remember it as of that matter. I was losing touch in reality. My vision was cross-eyed as I tried my best to keep a normal vision. Finally, I get home and I give all my weed to my friend as the dab fucked me up. It was $50, but I didn't care, the anxiety was through the roof. I get inside my house and take a shower to try and calm my nerves. I still couldn't recognize my body in the mirror, I felt like I was actually in hell, literal hell. Since then I know now that hell is actually extremely real and heaven is too. As the past couple of days the devil let us has been eye-opening for me. I could have states of extreme happiness and ecstasy, the feeling of warm hugs and heavenly laughs, and kisses, and others where I overwhelmingly want to escape my mind and suffering almost if I'm reliving my mind's regrets. I can remember laying on the floor of the bathroom and back in the shower tub. I repeated this around twice and was praying for this to be over. Finally I sit in the tub, close my eyes and start to vomit on myself, trying my hardest to not choke on vomit. I eventually pass out in the shower. My mom eventually walks in at 3 a.m. and gets scared because she thought I was dead. The end. Moral of the story is don't kill your brain cells, kids. Third eye shit is crazy, folks, it's real. What's that story you've never been able to tell? When I was 17, I worked at a grocery store with a guy named Brian. Normal guy, mid-20s, lil chub. Didn't really think much of him. One day he tells me about how he lives in an apartment by himself and that his neighbors are absolutely crazy. Like they would yell at him to be quiet, pound against the wall to get him to shut up, even though he wouldn't be doing anything. He would sneeze, and his neighbors would scream at the top of their lungs from next door. It was that bad. TBH, I didn't really care much when he was telling me this. I just wanted to go home and not work anymore. Couple days go by and I noticed that Brian wasn't showing up anymore. Whatever. Didn't think much of that either. A month or two goes by and he finally shows back up to work. So, being the nice friend I am, I asked him where he's been. He tells me he was actually fired because he was in the hospital. I didn't think that was a valid reason to fire someone, but what do I know? I didn't comment on that. I asked him why he was in the hospital and he told me it was for personal reasons. I tell him it was good having him back and carried on with my day. Fast forward a couple days to me talking to another coworker who was good friends with Brian. He says, "Did you hear what happened to Brian? Yeah, he was in the hospital and was fired or something. Do you know why though?" No, he said it was personal. So this is what happened a couple months ago before Brian disappeared. He was at home by himself when his neighbors, surprise, start yelling at him through the walls for being too loud. Brian, telling himself, "I've had enough," decides to call the police and have them deal with it. The police arrived and started talking to the neighbors for quite some time. Hours go by with the police and neighbors. So he calls the police again to ask what's taking so long. The police respond with, "We left like an hour and a half ago." Turns out that the neighbors were never yelling at him. In fact, they were never there. Brian was schizophrenic and was hearing voices in his head. He had to go to a mental hospital for a month. When I was in kindergarten, I fell asleep on the bus to school. No one woke me up. I wake up eventually and the bus is empty. I panic, as any 5-year-old does, and run to the front of the bus and try the door. It's locked. It was parked in a KFC parking lot, so people were coming in and out of the building. I started wailing with terror, banging on the glass doors, snot pouring down my face and into my mouth as people walk by and point at me. They mumbled and got into their car and left. By the time the bus driver finally came back out with her chicken meal, the entire door was covered in my slobber and tears. She instructed me how to open the closed door so she didn't have to put her meal down. I was still freaking out obviously and didn't understand. So she sighed, put her food down and finally opened the door and asked me what was I doing there. She called the school and drove me there, still covered in snot. I remember walking into my class with everyone standing in a line and hugging me one at a time. After that day, they made a rule for all bus drivers to get up and walk the bus front to back to make sure no kids get left sleeping. I grew up in a very conservative household, sex was never talked about at all, and you knew if you got caught with something you shouldn't you'd be in giant trouble. When I was 17 I bought a vibrator. I had literally no experience, even alone, but was super curious. The way it worked was you had to screw the bottom off it on to keep the batteries in and to turn it on. I put it underneath my bed, and thought I had it unscrewed enough that it would stay off until later. Well, I'm downstairs listening to a CD player with my headphones on, and suddenly I hear my 2 young sisters yelling about something and running around the house. I take my headphones off and I hear BZZ echoing through the house. My room was directly above the living room, and my floor was wooden. They're feeling out, thinking there's a wasp in the house or something electrical is about to explode. Thank God my parents weren't home, they probably would have figured it out a lot easier. One sister runs upstairs, realizes it's coming from my room, and I dash ahead of her and just throw myself over the bed to feel underneath it. I turn off the vibrator and then tell them my old phone was under there and must have had an alarm on it, which made no sense. It had been months since I changed phones. They don't believe me and think it must be the pipes under my room. They tell my parents when they get home that the pipes freaked out. My family listens closely for months to see if we need to call a plumber. I decided to take my terrible secret to the grave, and then 10 years later post it on Reddit. The end. My brother was visiting us for Christmas. He went out with one of his girlfriend's cousins and they got pretty drunk. My brother didn't have a license due to issues in his 20s, so his friend drove. There was video surveillance of the friend driving the truck and doing donuts in the parking lot. We found out later from my brother's girlfriend that the vehicle they were in had a passenger side door that didn't fully latch closed. Apparently while driving home my brother leaned against the door, fell out, and his head was ran over. He died instantly. The friend was so concerned with covering his own ass that he swore up and down my brother was driving. Because he was the survivor, the cops took his word for it. I distinctly remember this guy showing up to the funeral and coming up to me. He said, "I'm sorry I killed your brother." He harassed us for months trying to ensure we weren't going to do further investigations because it was pretty clear the dude was drunk driving. He also would Facebook message me constantly trying to get me to go out on a date with him. I was 16, he was in his 30s. Nothing ever happened to him. Even after a full investigation. I'll never understand how the ball was dropped on so many levels. First, how the staff at the bar let them drive home being very clearly hammered. Edit to add, my brother had a 7-year-old son at the time. I'll never forget him being curled up all night on the couch not understanding what happened. But knowing his dad died. Heartbreaking. I've been itching to share this but couldn't really find a place to share. I call it The Inconvenient Man, so here I go. I own a convenience store in a small town. So there's his man, an immigrant. Either Thai or Indonesian, not really sure, but he come to my store about once a week to buy stuff. He always wear the same setup. A farmer's hat, a jacket, unzipped, shorts and flip-flops. Underneath his jacket he wear a small sling bag and t-shirt. Inside his sling bag, he has a phone and a wallet that is almost the same size as his sling bag. So every time he wanted to pay something, he has to get his wallet out from his sling bag. But because his wallet is so big, it's very difficult to take it out. So he has to undo his sling bag to make it easier. Then, because he wear his sling bag underneath his jacket, he has to take off his jacket and hat in order to take off his sling bag. After finish paying, he has to wear everything in order again. Also, he seems to put his money in random compartment in his wallet. It's not even organized, a few $1, $2, $5, $10 in this compartment, then a few $2, $5 in that, and so on. It's so fucking frustrating to watch him do this every time. And for some fucking reason, he likes to buy stuff one at the time. Like once he finished buying one stuff, he'll walk out the store and return a few seconds later. Then he has to repeat the same process again. I swear to God, he took almost an hour to pay for 3 items.